All right. Yeah, so I don't really have a topic for today. So what I wanted to do was get some recommendations from people in the modding community about what to do. And I got a few so far. People were asking about how do the movers work, how do levers work. So I might show off movers, levers, and buttons and that kind of stuff. And then I'm gonna put out a call for more. Yeah, if anybody doesn't know, we do have a Delver Discord. The The unofficial Delver Discord is now the official Delver Community Discord, which is where we've been having a lot of good modding related talk, and people have been posting the stuff that they're working on and asking questions, and it's really been a fun place to hang out and watch what's going on lately. You'll find me there as well, just helping out. Let me post over there as well. Sorry about this. Getting started a little later today. All right, so let's get started. Let's try doing some simple, yeah, just like a trigger stream maybe today. So let's see, the first thing I want to do, let's just make us a little room to play around in. Whoops, that's not a floor. Make a cool little room. Make it a little more interesting. Put some lights in here. It's funny how every time I go to do something like this, I end up making a new test room because it's so easy to do. I have other rooms that I probably could just load up and do this, but it's so easy to do this yourself that I usually spend the 30 seconds to set up a room every time I start, which is that's a good way to play around with the editor, I think. Uh, let's put a big light in here too. Oh, RGC Dev, what's for dinner? We must have weird time set offsets then, since it is noon where I am. There's a light. Don't want it to be quite this bright though. Ooh, cool. And this is what I'm going to be working on today, so I'm just going to save this out here, probably in this mods folder. I'm going to call this triggers. How do we want to get started? I think I can just start by showing off just how a basic trigger setup would work. I think I showed this off in one of the other streams. Like, one of the easy ways to show this off is by putting a door down. Like, we'll put this door down. We'll drop it over here in the corner, maybe. And if we wanted to, we could just sort of wall this off so that it actually goes somewhere. Move that to the floor. So now we have this door in the corner. Doesn't really go anywhere, but it'll show off what we're trying to do. So we could actually lock this door. I'm going to do that. I'm going to say that this is a locked door. So now we're going to have to trigger this thing to be able to open it up. So the first thing you need to know about triggers is that it works based on giving entities names, or what we call IDs in Delver. Everything references that. If you look at any entity, like there's that door, but even if I drop down something like this bread, there, let's put some bread in the level. If you look at the properties for an entity, underneath general, everything has this ID. So bread is empty, door ID is empty. By default, that's just null, that's empty. But you can let that be whatever you want. It's just a name. However you name these things is up to you. I'm just going to call this thing door1. We could give this an ID of bread if we wanted to. Bread1. Which it's not really going to do anything, but oh well. Actually, so what I think I could do is I could say, so this bread1, when you pick it up, maybe it triggers door1. And now when you pick up this bread, that door opens. I'm not sure why. Maybe it's magic bread? This is actually door bread. Now if you look at this, you pick up the door bread, the door opens. And that's a pretty basic display of how IDs work in Delver. So what's going on here is when you pick up this piece of bread, there's a property on an item that says, hey, when the player picks this up, call this trigger. And if the trigger is door1, the game is going to go ahead and look for any entities with that same name and trigger them. And in the case of a door, triggering the door means that it opens. That's a pretty basic case. Of course, in a real game, what you would probably do is put something down like maybe a button instead. So a button is a mesh that when you walk up to it, you can use it and it will fire a trigger. Right now, this isn't doing anything because we don't have this triggers ID property set on it. Same like with what we did with the bread. If we put door1 down here, now when we use this, it'll go ahead and open the door. And you'll see that since this is a trigger, the editor is smart enough to know to draw these little lines between the trigger and the thing that it's linked to, just as like a little helper. It doesn't know how to do that with bread, but for most of the triggers, it'll do that. So you can easily see that these two items are linked together now. And it's the same thing with the lever entity, which is actually a group. Like I can go ahead and ungroup this thing and you'll see it's just a static mesh for the base. And then the lever part of it, this is a button just like that other thing was. So if I set the trigger's ID on this to door1, now we have a trigger where we have this lever that opens the door. Cool. Animation is kind of weird on that though, so. Actually, so that seems fine, but the collision radius is kind of off on that. If we look at it, yeah, I think it needs to be taller. And that's based on the collision, so I'm just going to go ahead and bump that up so that it takes up the whole, or at least most of the area. And I could make this a little smaller as well on the sides. Can you trigger a trigger? You can trigger a trigger. That just gets recursive after a while. Cool, so now we have a trigger. I think it's moving a little too far down though, which is a good way to show off how these work. So these buttons, they have a transformation and a rotation on how they move. You'll see here the transformation is 0 in the X and Y, but in the Z axis it's -15. So that means that when you trigger it, it's going to move down by that amount, and when you trigger it, it's going to rotate by that much on the X. So we can play around with this. Like if we set this to 10, it's not going to move as much anymore. It's mostly just going to sink down. I liked where that was with 30. I'm going to keep that there, but I think I'll make it move down less so that it's more rotation and less movement. Yeah, that works pretty nicely. Maybe even less. Just a little bit. Cool. Yeah, and there are other properties on here like the time it takes to reset. If we bump that up to 100, after you trigger this, it's going to open the door, but it'll take a lot longer to go back to normal. So you could use that as sort of like timing. Yeah, you could make like a weird Rube Goldberg machine here. Yeah, let's see that. I wonder if we could do that with multiple triggers. Let's try something out here. This might not work since we're doing it live, but it might be fun to test out. Whoops. So what I want to do is I want to duplicate this that I have. Now we have two levers. They're both set up to open the door. So I can pull one, and then I'll pull the other one, and it'll close the door. But what would happen if instead I gave this button a trigger of, I'm going to call that lever 1, and then this one will be lever 2. And now when you pull this one, instead of triggering door 1, I want to trigger lever 1 instead. Now what happens? So I pull the lever. Ooh. That sort of works. Looks like it skips the opening animation, but it does trigger the other trigger, and then the button thinks that because it's been triggered, that means you pressed it, so then it does the animation back from the other side. So that doesn't quite work maybe the way I wanted it to, but yeah, typically when you're doing something like this, you'd have our more basic trigger setup. If you go trigger basic, these are invisible. They don't actually show up in the game, but they're doing the same thing that these levers do. So if I set this trigger to be trigger type player touched, and then I gave it a message so that we can see what it says. Hello world. So now when I walk through where that is, I should see hello world pop up on my screen. Another thing to note is that if I stand where the trigger is, hello world is going to show up on my screen forever, because every time the game runs the game logic, it's going to see that I'm standing there and fire the trigger. And because this is set to reset immediately, it's just going to keep firing just basically as fast as the game can fire it. So what we'll do is we'll give it a reset time instead. So when we stand there, it fires, it waits 100 units of time, and then it'll fire it again. Let's make that even bigger. And then make it so that the message doesn't last quite as long. Yeah, so now we see that we'll stand here, and you'll see the message when the trigger fires, it'll show the message, and when it fires again, it'll show it again. So we get this little looping here. If we set that down to really low, it would probably show it off a little better. So here we have a really quick message. And then if we'd set the reset time down to something really small, that'll just keep flashing, or even faster. Yeah, now it's just flickering because it's happening fast enough. But yeah, these are going to be very important if you're doing something in the game like what we're doing right here. Like if I set this to trigger the door right now, triggers ID door 1. Let's just move that over a little bit. So if I go stand here, now we just have a wiggly door because we keep standing on the trigger. It's just getting the message to open and close over and over and over again, which doesn't really work very well. Another thing you can do is just say, hey, trigger, never reset. So this is basically a one-time use trigger. So when I go ahead and I touch that, this trigger is done. It gets cleaned up after this. So we've touched it, it opens the door, that trigger is gone. So that only happens once. Whereas these will just reset forever. I think if on one of these, if we set it to not reset, it'll just stay in that end position forever. Yeah, so this lever, it will be like that forever. You'll never be able to pull it again. Oh yeah, since this is pretty small right now, if I turn it to solid, we can actually see this little box is what is being checked against the player position. It's really small right now. You have to basically stand right on top of that thing for it to work. But we can bump that up. If I bump this up to like 10, now it's huge. Now this is a huge box that we can stand in. So if we stand anywhere inside of this box, if I turn is solid back to false, otherwise we will actually collide with it. So now when I play, it doesn't matter where in this room I am, that door is going to open. Yeah, we saw it pop up there. You may enter. Let's show that for 5. So now I'm standing in the giant trigger, shows the message, it opens the door. Yeah, it might be nice to always show the trigger collision boxes. I guess I was worried about stuff really getting cluttered when you were flying around, but you can't always hit the B key in the editor to turn off most of that stuff, so maybe it would be fine. Oh, that's neat. I noticed that when you're in that mode, I can still see the player shadow. That's interesting. Anyway. Yeah, so that's sort of the basics of these levers and triggers, but now we can get a little more fancy with this. Let's look at what other triggers we have. We have a bunch. So we were just using the basic. There's progression check. This checks a value that gets persisted for the run. So if you wanted to have something happen once per run or once per game, you could put that in there. We have these conditional triggers. These are cool. So we have a conditional trigger. These will compare a value, and you can choose like equal or not equal, greater than, less than. And there's this increment when triggered mode that is new that I think I could show off. So we can set this to be increment when triggered. We can set the test value to 5. Yeah, this is something I just added later. Set it to greater, and then we can set this to trigger door 1. Cool. Let's make this actually show up in the game. So if we turn hidden to false, and we play the game, now we see the trigger. So this is set to use. If I make this solid, like what you could use this for is kind of like a button. So I walk over here, I hit use once, doesn't do anything, except hit my breakpoint that I had set. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now the door opens. Since it's fired, I fired that 6 times, and it doesn't actually call the trigger's ID until this value is set. And when increment is triggered, means it starts checking at 0, and then as soon as it gets greater than that test value, that's when it actually gets fired. We could also set this to equal. Yeah, I guess I could show that up too. So now if we hit this 5 times, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the next time it's going to open the door, next time it's going to close the door. We'll keep doing that. But maybe we will only want something to happen when this gets to 5. We just set this to equal in that case. So now we'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The door opens, and we can keep using it, and nothing happens anymore. But it doesn't have to be used directly. So if we put that trigger up there where nobody can get to it, we'll still say, hey, yeah, you do open the door. But I'm going to unlink that from the door. And now, yeah, let's get rid of this as well. So what I want to happen is I want there to be a lever that you have to pull the lever 5 times to open the door. And we can do that by chaining all of these things. So I'm going to chain the lever to the conditional trigger to the door. So we need to give this conditional trigger an ID as well. I'm going to call this the counter. Or, yeah, I think that'll work. So then this will This lever is going to trigger counter. Oops. So now, if I pull this, whoops. Oh, come on. If I pull the lever, it's not going to do anything. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I could set this down to like 2. It doesn't need to be 5. 2. And this will definitely reset because we'll need it to reset. So we'll pull the lever once, doesn't do anything. Pull the lever twice, door opens. 3 times, nothing happens. Yeah, so what we have going on here is we have the lever hit this trigger, which does all of the same stuff that it was doing when we were hitting it directly, except now it's getting hit by the lever instead of us having to actually interact with it. That's how these things kind of chain. So that's a simple example of that. Cool. That works pretty well. What other trigger types do we have to show off? So basic, progression check, conditional, music. You can have a music trigger so that when it gets triggered, like if a player stands in a certain spot, you could switch up the music. Ambient sound is the same thing. When you stand there, it'll change out the ambient sound that's being played in the background. There's a shake. The shake, I guess it does what it says on the tin. So if I walk up here and I use it, it adds in some screen shake. Everybody loves screen shake. I could keep using this all day and make everybody sick. What other trigger types? Then we have, so that was the shake. We have a flash that does kind of like a screen flash to a color. Triggered trap. These make explosions of various types, like teleport trap. If this is set up to, so if I walk over here, it's going to teleport me somewhere. Or maybe it won't teleport me somewhere. Maybe that doesn't work in the editor. What if it poisoned me? Yep. So here's a trap that will just poison you forever if you stand in it. That but it resets immediately. So if you'll see when I'm standing there, it's just gonna keep making those. If I made this a lot bigger, you could see better the problem with it the way it's set up right now. Which is here's an explosion that will never stop because it will never reset. Which I guess is a neat effect if you want to kill the player like immediately, but funny thing is I can't even get close enough to this for it to damage me because it pushes me way too fast. So that was the trap. We also have teleport, shop. Shop's an interesting one. That if I walk up to this and use it, it's a shop. I can buy things from it. And then if you look at the properties for a shop, this could be an upgrade shop, or it can sell scrolls or potions or weapons. So you can kind of choose. Yeah, here's a scroll shop. You can also give it a message file to play if you wanted there to be some dialogue before the actual shop showed up. So there's that. There's a message. This is how all the NPC dialogue works in the game. Whoops. Has to be solid for me to be able to use it. Error loading none dat. Because there is no none dat. What else do we have? There's a game over, there's a button, there's a repeater, there's a lever, and then there's an achievement. Achievement probably won't ever do anything for you, since we have to actually set those up on the Steam side. Yeah, so what if we wanted to spawn a monster? what we could do is we could go spawners and put down a monster spawner. And how these would work is normally you put one down on the ground, you play the game, and it'll put a monster there. But it's gonna do it immediately when we start playing. So what if we just wanted to spawn a thief whenever it got triggered? So instead then we change the spawn and say, hey, wait for a trigger before you do anything. So right now we play the game and nothing happens. But we could have it happen if we gave this an ID of like spawner. Maybe what we should do is copy this conditional trigger, have it trigger the spawner instead. Whoops, that's not right. I want the trigger's ID to be spawner. Yeah, I know. There, now we have the line set up. But instead of being equal to 2, I want this to be less than 2. So now every time I use the lever, it's going to spawn a monster until you've done that enough times, and then it will actually open the door. So there's the second one, now the door opens. So that could be cool. Maybe we'll do something like this. What if there were 2 levers? We could set one of these to spawn monsters, and we could set the other one to open the door. So now this one opens the door, but this other one, now it's a trap. Now the player will walk up here. They won't know which one to use, so they might come up here and pull that one, and now they spawn a monster. You could just keep doing that. But I think it'll only spawn one the way it's set up for right now. Yeah, destroy after spawn. I'm going to set that to false. So now we should be able to spawn more monsters than just one. There's 1. There's 2. Yeah, so now we can spawn monsters. If we wanted to, we could put that up in the air. So that they like fall from the ceiling or do something fun like that. So let's say that this is not hidden, so when we play the game, we see it there. Move that up. Maybe the radius will be a little bigger, so that they don't always come from the same spot. So now when we pull that, now monsters fall from the sky. That's fun. Yeah, this could be dangerous as well though. Like if we had this basic trigger, had this to spawn the spawner, I think this would just maybe flood the room with monsters. Yeah, player touched, it'll reset immediately. Yeah, now it rains monsters. This is bad. Yeah, you can use triggers to make monster closets. You can even set how many monsters spawn. So if I set that to 5, it's gonna spawn 5 monsters every time I pull this. Yeah, ta-da! We can make these all random too. They don't just have to be the thief. We could just say, hey, go grab a dungeon monster. So now, dungeon monsters will fall from the sky every time we pull this. Or maybe just bats could spawn. Bat. Which might make a little more sense. You pull that, and then there's a bunch of bats. Too many bats. Yeah, you can do some really fun stuff with triggers. So that's the monster. That's a monster spawner. We have other spawners. We have item spawners as well. Maybe what I want. Yeah, so now whenever we play the item spawner is going to spawn just a random melee weapon from the sky. I think I'm going to do the same thing. Wait for trigger is true. Yeah, there's a lot of triggering going on in this stream. And then, what do we want to call this? We could call this spawner. So now every time we spawn monsters, we'll also spawn an item from the sky. But it's set up to only happen once. Maybe these always just happen once. Yeah, these don't work quite the same way that monster spawners do. So you can't just spawn a pile of items on each other. Although we could duplicate this a bunch of times. Now we should have it just raining items. Oh, they spawn in each other, so now they're just stuck. So we have monsters to fight, but it gave us weapons as well. So risk reward. Monster dying can be a trigger. It's a little bit harder to set up though. If I put a basic monster down, basic monster, here's my monster. Let's see, they have a lot of properties. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, one of them is triggers on death. So I think I could type spawner in there. Now, if I kill this guy, oh, are you not solid? If it was a solid monster, then I could fight it. So now, if I kill him, it spawns all of those other items, all of the other monsters. Cool. That's kind of neat. So you could have kind of like a mini boss set up here where you kill one of these and it spawns other things to fight. Or if you wanted to, you could say, hey, when you die, go ahead and open this door. What was this called? So this was door 1. That was... This is counter? Maybe we'll do that. So if we kill... Yeah, you could attach a spawner to the monster to do something weird as well. So I'm going to have 2 of these monsters, and both of them hit the counter trigger when they die. So now we need to kill both of these, and the door will open. That's pretty cool. So you could fill a room with monsters and then make the player kill them all to continue. That's really neat. Yeah. What else could we do to show off this? Triggers. Now let's show a warp. These kind of work the same way. What if there's a higher area here that you can't get to? Put that down. Let's put some loot up here. So now you have this area that the player can see, but they can't get to it. If we put a warp marker up here, just under entities and then level warp, we'll put a warp marker here. And we'll call this thing, we'll call this ledge. Let's also make this draw. So now we can see the warp marker up there, but to get to it, we can add another level warp. This is gonna be a teleporter. And this is gonna teleport to ledge. Now if I stand here, it'll teleport me to the ledge. Let's make that hidden again. Otherwise it's just gonna get in my way. This one can draw though. So now if we go and touch the question mark, it'll send us up here to the ledge. Happens pretty fast though, and without any fanfare. we could turn on the teleport effect, and now when we touch it, it spawns a light and some particles. You can see we could just do this all day. Or what if we moved this over here, move them on top of each other? Yeah, now this is dangerous because you could just, now you're playing with portals. Yeah, you can make endless hallways and stuff with this. Or you could do something like this. So you fall in the pit, and if this covers up all of the bottom, you'll fall in the pit, but instead of hitting the bottom, you'll just fall. So you can make it so that if you fall in the pit, it'll respawn you over here, which is kind of like a cool technique. I think games like Duke Nukem used to do this a lot. It sort of pretending that they had room over room stuff when they actually didn't. They were just teleporting you somewhere else. Yeah, if we want to do something like that, we'd turn off the teleport effect. So now it seems like you walk over here and then you just fell from the ceiling. We could dress that up a little bit. Yeah, let's just make this, let's make this match. I'm just gonna make this a 1 tile wide place to fall through. This will be a better illusion of what's going on. So now we fall down, and it seems like we just fell through the ceiling. Part of the way this effect works is because on this teleporter it has preserve offset true, and what that means is that when you hit that teleporter, it's gonna take your position minus the teleporter's position, teleport you to the other teleport area, and then add on a little bit of an offset based on what was left over. That just makes it so that if we are bumped up to the side of this tile, they're going to stay on the side of it when you fall down. So it seems more like you're not being teleported somewhere. If we set that to false, it's always going to put us at the exact position of the teleporter, and it's going to be a little jarring because you'll see it happen. So if I'm way on the side, it's going to put me exactly in the middle. So I think it feels a little nicer, at least in cases like this, to have that on. There are some cases where that might break, though. You'll just need to test it out. What else could we do with those? We could do something similar, where we could do like an endless hallway. So let's copy that, and we'll put it here instead. Now if we walk through there, it's going to spawn us in the ceiling. I think what I want, let's do something like this. We'll put a torch there. We'll put this on one end. So we have a teleporter on one side. Which is just going to be tall enough to cover this area. So now you won't be able to walk through here without touching it. And we'll give it the illusion that this hallway goes somewhere, even though it doesn't actually go anywhere. And that's going to send us to hallway. And let's go ahead and copy a warp marker so that we don't have to put it down again. We'll put it here. We'll put it in this guy. And then this one is going to be called hallway. So now when we walk through here, it will send us back. Yeah, we can sell this a little bit better. Like, if we make this hidden, we'll go ahead, we'll walk towards the end of the hallway, but you'll see it pop us back. So we don't actually go anywhere. It looks like it's going somewhere, but you're not really. How could we sell this even more? So yeah, let's give this little bend. And then over here, let's put a warp marker over here so that when you're coming at it, you see this little 90-degree bend. And same here, but we'll move this to be in a similar location as to where that would be on the other side. So now we have a hallway that looks it looks almost the same as the other side. But you walk through it and you end up on the other side. So you could just keep doing this forever. Yeah, what's actually happening is you walk through here, you hit the teleporter, it sends you back over here. But since these two areas look exactly the same, to the player, it seems like they're just walking through a hallway. We do need to make sure that these are set up in the same spot, though. I think that's in the middle, so that looks like it's in the middle of the first tile. So that would be right there. Yeah, you see the little pop of the wall textures changing? But if we change that to something that wouldn't change, like let's go ahead and use those room textures instead. Let's just set these up. Now we have a hallway that looks like this. And these don't change since we've never told these textures to swap themselves out. So now you can't even tell that anything is happening anymore. It just looks like you're walking through the hallway. But if you turn around, you do see it happening then. This is a great way to mess with players, because they'll be getting teleported around, but you can't tell that it's happening. It's a really neat effect. You can tell there, though. I marked the wall. So now you can see those two wall splats, but I walk up to them and they're gone. This would be fun to have a level set up like this. So, all kinds of fun stuff you could do with that. I do like the fake... Give that a texture. If we gave the floor texture this black, so now it looks like it's just a hole. You can't see down there. This would be a great place to put the teleporter. So we would need another warp marker. Put that in the middle. We'll call this fall. We could copy the one that we had. That's going to send us to fall. I think that's still set up. Yeah, you can still kind of see that one. If we made that not show, we move that up a little bit so that you don't get all the way down to the bottom. It looks like you're falling. And we would need to make sure that these are, yeah. I think the higher we do it, the better, so that if you teleport in the middle of this, we want it to send you to a similar spot up here. Especially if we can line them up vertically well, then even the textures will line up. and then you won't even see the fall happening. I think that works pretty well. So now it seems like you fall down here and you're in a new room, but you're actually just in the same hallway. We can change the ceiling here to be that same thing. And now even if the player was looking up, they wouldn't quite be able to tell that it's happening. That's really cool. Yeah, so I think we've done enough with spawners and triggers and stuff. Let's do some movers quickly, since I am running out of time. It's just that those things are so fun to play with. You can do awesome stuff with that. Movers are underneath basic, I think. 2.5D. Queen Jazz loves it when people say stuff like Doom was actually a 2D game. Just loves that. Let's see. Where are the movers? Maybe I'm blind. Oh, they're up on top. I'm gonna make a basic mover. Time is a dimension, isn't it? Here we go. So now we have a mover. And I'm gonna get rid of these monsters so that I don't have to fight them. These will just show off a mover at its most basic. What a mover is just an entity that you can stand on and has a start position and an end position and some different values for tweaking that. So now we have a whole line of movers that you walk on them and they start moving up into the air, they wait there for a little bit, and then they come back down. Which is kind of basic. These right now, you could use this as like an elevator or a platform, but there's no reason these couldn't be doors or even crusher traps if we made this the other direction. Or maybe I can just show this off. If I make this move more vertically, so now if I stand on it, it's going to go up in the air, but it's going to try to come back down, and if I stand underneath it, it's going to squish and kill me. But what instead of moving up, it just moved down instead? Now, it's not an elevator, now it's a trap that will try to kill you. But there's no way for this thing to start. So what we could go ahead, let's give this an ID of Crusher. And we'll put just a basic trigger underneath it. We'll set that trigger up to be, if the player touches it, it's going to trigger the Crusher. So we'll see the line draw between these things. And we'll set this to never reset. So you hit it once, that'll start falling down. Maybe it does reset. Maybe it resets. Go away. Trigger resets, but the reset time, maybe it's like 100. So that it doesn't happen right away, because you don't want it to just turn around. Now it's a Crusher trap. What if we change the squish damage to 100? Now this is just rude. Now you just die. So this is just showing off how general purpose these things can be. And now we have an elevator, which is pretty fast. We can slow these things down too. We can say that it moves, hey, instead of taking a second to move, what if it took 5 seconds to move? Now we have a slower elevator, which makes a little more sense. Let's pull that out from the wall, just so that nothing spawns above it. Right now these are set to start moving whenever we touch them, but there are other modes for that as well. So mover mode is on player touch, or it could be starts immediately. So now it will just start moving. It'll come back. And it'll stop. because the end mode is set up to return. So this will start moving once, it checks the end mode, which says to go back, and it'll stay there. But we can also set this to loop. And this should make a mover that goes up, waits for a bit, comes back down, and then it should just do this forever. That's interesting. It's kind of slow though. What if we sped this up? That's a little more fun. So now we have this thing moving around, and I think if we stand on it, it'll actually, yeah. That's cool. If it moved faster, I think it would fling us up in the air. Let's set the move time to like half. That's really fast. We stand on it, and now it's a trampoline. This is really fun. I haven't seen anybody do anything with these yet, but that would be really cool to see. What if I just filled up the room with these? So now we have a big platform, basically, that flings you up in the air whenever you try to walk on it. This is neat. Although they all start at the same time. What if we gave them a little bit of a delay? So I think what we could do is we could change the start weight. Maybe 1, 0.1, 1.2, 1.3, and so on. So now these all should sort of chain together. This is neat now. Now, these will just pop us around. Ow. If you wanted to, you can make like kind of puzzle rooms like this, where you make the player navigate some hazard, or maybe use these just as traversal mechanics. So maybe the only way up on that ledge is to get a bounce high enough to get up there. Or maybe there's a ledge that the only way, or like a pit, where the only way to get across is by using the momentum of one of these to fling you over. Right now these are moving up and down, but they can also move in other directions as well. Like this one. We change the moves by and the rotates by, we can make these move in different directions. And then if we change the interpolation mode, it will change how they move. Now this one will linearly just move back and forth in an angle. Ow, that's moving a little too fast for me to stand on it. We slow it down a little bit. Now we have that. You might have seen these used in Delver in the base game to get across a pit. Like if this didn't move vertically at all and it only moved horizontally, we could tell it to take us to the other side of this. Yeah, bounce pads would be super fun. So let's say this floor is actually a pit. Bigger pit. So now the only way across it is to use this to get to the other side. And instead of starting immediately, we probably want this to be, or maybe it would wait. So it'll wait for half a second on either side, and it'll go. So now I could jump on this thing. Ah. That didn't work out very well. I think it's moving too fast. Let's slow this down a little bit. Huh. What is the collision on this? kind of pushing me forward more than it should for whatever reason. I should look into that. Chad, what have you done? But something like this could be an interesting way to get across. Maybe this would be a whole series of these. If you offset the timing on them, you can do neat stuff. Yeah, nothing like streaming to find bugs. It seems like it always happens then. So now these are offset a little bit from each other. Not by much, just by a little bit. Move one direction, then they'll move back. But instead of you can chain these things as well. I think this will be the last thing that I can show in here. Maybe. Let's say that these rotate a little bit as well. What does that do? I'm going to do that. So these won't actually move anywhere. So I'll just start with one. So this doesn't move anywhere right now. It's a mover that does nothing. Let's start the start weight to 0 and the end weight to 0. So let's say these rotate. Let's bump up the timing. So now this just spins back and forth. Let's make it spin by 90 degrees. Now I stand on this and it rotates me around. If I wanted to, I can make a bridge across. That would be a pain in the ass to get to the other side. So now I can get to the other side, but I need to worry about the direction that I'm facing in. Oh, holy, yep. This is difficult. There. So you could set up like a whole clockwork room if you wanted to, where you have to traverse these little puzzles to get across. Yeah, one thing to note is that the bounding boxes on these, it's still square. Everything is axis aligned in Delver for collision. So when these things rotate, it's always, the collision box isn't changing with it. It's just staying the same square that it was. That's just to make collision checks super fast. But it means that, like, if this was rotated like this, like the little bits of the corner you won't actually be able to stand on. So that is one thing to watch out for with these. You can make something that looked a little more round though and kind of fudge on the collision. That might work a little better. Oh wow, this is hard. There, but you can get to the other side. I thought there was a mode. Oh, repeat. Here what we do, repeat. If it's set to repeat, these things will just keep spinning forever. So if you wanted to make like a gear system where they just repeated forever, you could do that. So this one is now something I can stand on that was just going to spin like this forever. Maybe let's make a way across like this instead. And we could give these a different file. We could say meshes. I thought there was a gear in here somewhere. Yeah, here we go. Gear. That's a big gear. But this might actually work for what we want to do. I'll have to change the collision to match a little more. Let's get that to cover most of it. That might be okay. Maybe just a little more. And we'll delete these. So now we have this giant gear. And it's just going to spin. Going to spin in place forever. But we can walk on it, and it's going to spin us around too. This is pretty neat. So we can make a whole series of these. Let's get those teeth to line up. Or at least kind of line up. There. We could go like totally Castlevania Clockwork Mansion style if we wanted to. Although these should rotate in opposite directions. So let's do that. So now it's, yeah, the teeth don't quite line up, but hey, it works for me. Mostly works. So now here's this cool thing. So there's a pit to fall in, so we could just totally biff it and die here. Yeah, I think this is what these gears were intended to be used for, but we never ended up putting them in the base game anywhere. But I would love to see them get added eventually. Somebody can do something fun with these. Yeah, look how cool this is now. So now we have this section that you have to run across these big rotating gears to do anything on. Or bread. What's wrong? These gears look fine. I mean, you want to take another stab at them? Yeah, maybe the art. I think the art quality in Delver has maybe gone up a lot since these got used. But yeah, I could see in my head a whole Clockwork Tower style area with gears and movers and just a bunch of crazy stuff happening that the player would have to make their way through. Like, there's no reason why. Like, this won't make any sense, but it'll be fun. And then I'll need to stop for the day. Let's do something like this. Let's make another gear and put it over here. This one's gonna spin. Instead of repeating, I want this thing to loop so that it keeps doing its action. But it's gonna go up to this next level. And let's see what that does. So now we have this gear where we could put it on like a post or something to kind of sell that a little more. Let's put a misc mesh. What? Actually, I think Dungeons has one. Where are you? Blah, 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 blah. Dungeon sets. Wood beam small vertical. And let's just sort of put these in the middle. Or mostly in the middle. And that'll look like this is somehow traveling up this system here. If we wanted to, we can make these also spin, but that's kind of overkill for what we want. Cool. There's that. So now we have a gear going up and down this series of columns, or this going up and down this beam. And I should be able to jump on it and ride it up to this one. Cool. Now I can get up top here. Look how 3D Delver is. So many dimensions. something like this would be really fun to see. I think this is cool. Yep. So this is kind of what I'd imagined using all of these gears for, and then we never did end up using them for anything, but they're still in the game, so if somebody wants to do something with them, then yeah, I would love to see it. I think that is all I can do for today, though. Since I need to go get some lunch. Even though this has been really fun, making these doors and the teleporters and everything in this pit. Everybody loves platforming puzzles. Oh yeah, Eldron. This is going to be the new Delver. I think I'm going to rip out every level and do this with it instead. I think that'd be a much better game. Take out all the RPG stuff and just make it a first-person puzzle platformer. But I'm going to save that for next stream. Yeah, Ultima 8 was my favorite Ultima game. Everybody loved that. So much better than 7. Alright. I'm going to call it here then. As